Europe's tank map has been fundamentally redrawn over the last 3 years, and the majority of people watching the news cycle completely missed the shift. For most of the post-Cold War era, the dominant assumption in Western defense circles was that heavy armor was a relic. Tanks were expensive, slow to deploy, and increasingly vulnerable to precision-guided munitions. After the Soviet Union collapsed, country after country across Western Europe quietly mothballed their armored fleets, cut procurement budgets, and redirected defense spending toward lighter, more flexible force structures, better suited to counter-terrorism and expeditionary missions. Germany went from fielding over 4,000 tanks at the Cold War's peak to barely 300 today. The Netherlands dissolved its independent tank force entirely for nearly a decade. France capped its fleet at 200. The logic seemed sound at the time. Then February 24, 2022 happened, and a land war of a scale not seen in Europe since 1945 exploded onto the continent's eastern edge. Russia didn't end the tank era, it restarted it. Within months of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, defense ministries across Europe were scrambling to reverse 2 decades of decisions. Procurement pipelines that had been deliberately wound down were suddenly being reopened. Emergency orders were being placed. And Poland, which had never fully bought into the tanks are obsolete narrative, was already 3 steps ahead of everyone else. The country had been watching Russia's behavior for years and drawing the only logical conclusion available. When your neighbor is willing to launch a full-scale land invasion, you had better have a serious ground force ready to meet it. Here is a number that sounds terrifying until you look past it. Russia currently operates an estimated 3,460 tanks, with approximately 2,100 additional older models sitting in storage facilities across the country. On the surface, that is an almost overwhelming figure. It's the kind of number that dominates headlines and generates alarming graphics on news broadcasts. But raw inventory counts are one of the most misleading metrics in modern military analysis, and Russia's tank roster is the clearest possible illustration of why. A substantial portion of that fleet consists of legacy Soviet-era models. The T-55, introduced in the early 1950s, the T-62, and various early T-72 variants that predate digital fire control systems entirely. These are not tanks in any meaningful competitive sense against modern Western armor. They lack thermal imaging capable of acquiring targets beyond 2 kilometers. They have no battlefield data sharing architecture, and their reactive armor packages are generations behind what NATO crews are now fielding. Ukraine has been destroying them at a consistent rate with weapons that were themselves considered secondary-tier anti-armor systems. Mass without quality isn't an army, it's a target list. The contrast with Poland's emerging fleet couldn't be sharper. Where Russia is drawing down degraded stockpiles faster than it can regenerate them, Poland is building upward from a baseline that already includes 3 of the most capable main battle tanks currently in production anywhere in the world. The gap between the 2 forces isn't just widening. It's widening in the dimension that actually determines battlefield outcomes in 2025 and beyond. Picture a military planner in Brussels sitting across a table from a Russian general, and the Russian slides over a single sheet of paper. On it, France, 200 tanks. United Kingdom, 213. Germany, 313. Spain, 274. The Russian smiles. The planner doesn't flinch. Because what that sheet of paper doesn't show is what those tanks actually are. Every single one of Germany's 313 tanks is a Leopard 2. A platform that multiple independent assessments from Jane's Defense, the International Institute for Strategic Studies, and NATO's own procurement bodies consistently rank among the 2 or 3 finest main battle tanks currently in operational service anywhere on Earth. Its 1,500 horsepower MTU diesel engine pushes it to 70 kilometers per hour on road. Its 120mm smoothbore cannon, paired with a Rheinmetall fire control suite, can acquire and strike a moving target at 5 kilometers, itself moving, with a hit probability that exceeds 90% under standard test conditions. Small fleet, wrong conclusion. France's 200 Leclercs tell a similar story. The tank is rare globally, but its autoloader cycles rounds faster than any crew-loaded competitor. And its modular armor system means field technicians can swap damaged panels in hours rather than days. A logistical advantage that compounds dramatically over a sustained campaign. The UK's Challenger 2, meanwhile, is one of only 2 tanks in history never to have had a crew member killed by enemy fire in combat. Western Europe's fleets look small on a spreadsheet. On a battlefield, they represent a concentration of lethality that numbers alone cannot capture. No other NATO member has done what Poland has quietly pulled off in the last 4 years. Building a frontline tank force, simultaneously drawing from 3 entirely separate national production lines, each representing a different peak of armored engineering. Right now, Poland's active fleet includes 180 K2 Black Panthers sourced from South Korea, 117 M1A2 Abrams and 116 M1A1 Abrams from the United States, and 202 Leopard 2s in 2 variants, the 2A5 and the locally upgraded 2PL. Add to that 205 PT-91 Twody tanks, Poland's own domestically developed derivative of the T-72, and 46 older T-72s still in service. That is already today, before a single additional delivery arrives, a more technologically diverse and capable armored force than any other country on NATO's eastern flank. The strategic logic behind fielding 3 premium platforms simultaneously is not obvious at first glance. Maintaining separate supply chains, training pipelines and maintenance protocols for 3 different tanks is genuinely complex and expensive. But Poland's defense planners made a deliberate calculation. Each platform covers a different operational profile. The Abrams brings overwhelming firepower and American interoperability. The Leopard 2 ensures seamless coordination with Germany and the dozen other European nations fielding the same hull. And the K2, well, the K2 is in a category of its own. 3 tanks, 1 message. Poland is serious. That message is directed less at NATO allies than at one specific audience in Moscow. Because what Poland is assembling isn't just a defensive force, it's a strategic signal. And every additional delivery makes that signal louder and harder to misread. In 2010, a South Korean engineering team at Hyundai Rotem sat down with one specific design brief. Build a tank that wins every single category simultaneously: mobility, firepower, protection, and battlefield intelligence, and accept no trade-offs. What they produced was the K2 Black Panther. And the result of that brief is a machine that genuinely unsettles military analysts who have spent careers insisting that every tank design involves painful compromises. The K2's in-arm suspension unit, a hydraulic system unique to this platform, allows it to kneel, lean sideways, and traverse broken terrain at speeds that would immobilize most competitors. On flat road, it reaches 70 kilometers per hour, identical to the Leopard 2. But it achieves that. On ground conditions, the Leopard 2 would slow significantly to handle. Its 120mm L55 smoothbore cannon, paired with an autoloader cycling at up to 15 rounds per minute, means a K2 crew can sustain fire rates that manually loaded tanks simply cannot match under pressure. But the detail that separates the K2 from every other tank currently in production is its KSTAM-2 munition. A top attack round that climbs in a high arc like an artillery shell and strikes the roof of an enemy tank. the thinnest and most vulnerable armor surface on any MBT in existence. It doesn't just fight tanks, it finds their weakest point. Layer on top of that, a radar-integrated active protection system, composite and explosive reactive armor, and a battlefield management suite that shares real-time data with drones and ground units simultaneously. The K2 isn't the largest tank on the battlefield. It doesn't need to be. It's the one that knows exactly where to hit you before you've finished acquiring it. If you've made it this far, you already understand that what Poland is building isn't just a bigger army. It's a fundamentally different kind of threat. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the second half, where we get into what 1,000 additional K2s actually means strategically, how NATO's armor is quietly converging into a unified force, and the single threshold moment that transforms Poland's build-up from preparation into something far more permanent. What does it actually mean when a country orders 1,000 additional tanks in a single contract? Not symbolically, mathematically. Consider the arithmetic. Poland currently operates roughly 820 combat-ready tanks across its 3 premium platforms. Add the 1,000 K2 and K2 PL units scheduled for delivery through the late 2020s, plus the existing 180 K2s already in service, and Warsaw arrives at a total fleet approaching 1,800 to 1,900 tanks. That figure overtakes Greece, currently second in Europe with 1,385, and closes the gap significantly on Turkey's continental leading 2,381. But the number itself is almost beside the point. The genuinely consequential detail buried inside that order is timing. The earliest K2 deliveries have already arrived in Poland. That means Polish tank crews are not waiting for hardware. They are training on it right now, today, accumulating the kind of platform-specific proficiency that takes years to build and cannot be fast-tracked under combat pressure. By the time the full 1,000-unit delivery is complete, Poland won't just have the tanks, it will have crews who have been living inside them for the better part of a decade. Hardware arrives in months. Expertise takes years. Russia can theoretically pull older tanks out of storage facilities and push them toward a front line. What it cannot do is conjure the trained crews, the maintenance infrastructure, and the institutional knowledge needed to operate modern systems effectively, at least not quickly. Poland is building exactly that institutional depth, deliberately and methodically, one training cycle at a time. Count the Leopard 2 operators across Europe and something remarkable emerges. A pattern that no single defense ministry planned, but that may turn out to be the most strategically significant development in NATO armor since the alliance was founded. Germany fields Leopard 2s. So does Spain, with 219 Leopard 2 ES and 55 Leopard 2 A4s. The Netherlands is returning to independent armored operations after years inside a joint German-Dutch unit, purchasing 46 new Leopard 2 A8S. Sweden operates 110 STRV-122S, widely regarded as among the finest Leopard 2 variants in active service anywhere. Finland has 200 Leopard 2s, split across 2 A4 and 2 A6 variants. Denmark, Norway, Portugal, Austria, Switzerland, Hungary, the Czech Republic, Slovakia. The list runs to over a dozen nations, all operating variants of the same fundamental platform. This was not coordinated procurement. It emerged organically from individual national decisions made across 3 decades. But the cumulative effect is extraordinary. When a Finnish tank crew and a Spanish tank crew deploy side by side, they are working with systems that share the same core architecture, the same spare parts ecosystem, and the same fundamental operating logic. Maintenance teams can cross-support. Ammunition is interchangeable. Tactical doctrine translates directly. 12 nations, one tank family. That is NATO's real armor advantage. Poland's K2 fleet sits alongside this Leopard 2 network rather than replacing it. Warsaw is not abandoning interoperability. It is layering an additional capability on top of an already unified foundation. What was once a fragmented patchwork of incompatible national fleets is consolidating quietly and without fanfare into something that functions increasingly like a single coherent armored force. Imagine standing at Poland's eastern border on a cold morning in late 2024. Behind you, freshly poured concrete, steel anti-tank barriers anchored into frozen ground, drone detection arrays mounted on newly constructed watchtowers every few kilometers, and underground, a network of hardened bunkers designed to survive the kind of artillery barrages that flattened entire Ukrainian cities. This is the Eastern Shield, Poland's €2.5 billion fortification program, running the full length of its border with Russia's Kaliningrad exclave and Belarus. It is the most ambitious border defense construction project undertaken by any NATO member in the post-Cold War era, and it operates on a logic that Poland's defense planners have been explicit about. Tanks win battles, but fortifications force the enemy to fight on your terms before the first tank engagement even begins. The Eastern Shield includes not just physical barriers, but layered anti-drone systems specifically engineered to counter the kind of cheap first-person view drone warfare that redefined ground combat in Ukraine. Poland watched Kyiv's experience in real time and drew direct operational lessons. If Russia ever crosses into Polish territory, it will immediately encounter a prepared defensive environment designed to channel, slow, and attrit an advancing force before it reaches open ground where mass might matter. Poland isn't waiting to be invaded. It's making invasion expensive before it starts. Pair that fortification network with a nearly 5% GDP defense budget, the highest proportion in the entire NATO alliance as of 2024, plus an expanding troop base and a civilian defense training program reaching hundreds of thousands of ordinary Polish citizens. The tanks are the headline. The Eastern Shield is the sentence that comes before it.